the fourth tenet really does compel us to contemplate the process perspective in relationship to our own personal experience, and to begin to notice how we create the illusion of, or the sense, or the experience of a personalized self-sense, or a personalized conviction or belief in a self that we create through personalizing different dimensions of a process that's not personal at all. So for example, we're all experience this so-called thought process. We all experience the process of thoughts moving past the eye of awareness. We all have the same experience of thoughts moving inside our minds. And I'm sure if we were to observe that process in most of the people in this room, I'm sure we share a lot more in common than we share differences, right? So there's so much of the process that we experience that is really similar, if not identical. If not identical. Right? So the more we begin to look at the process that we're experiencing, we begin to see that there is so much that most of our experience, the majority of our experience, is not really personal at all, and is definitely not unique to us. That we share most of what we experience, most of our subjective experience, is really a profoundly impersonal phenomena. So it's very interesting to see when people experience fear, when they are frightened, maybe by just a memory, or there's something they're worried about. They're experiencing fear for some reason or another. You'll notice that the separate self-sense or ego tends to swell and get big. So it's something very interesting to notice that around intense emotions that we feel with great intensity, the habit of personalization becomes more intense at the very same time. At the same time when often men or women who don't know much about haven't really looked very deeply into the nature of their own experience, for example, when they experience sexual feelings, exactly the same thing happens. The sense of a personal I or ego tends to expand, it increases, it gets bigger. And so it's very interesting to notice that around intense feelings and thoughts, but more specifically emotions, the habit of the mental habit of personalizing gets more profound, more intense. Mine. And it's important to understand in relationship to the whole notion of enlightenment is that the stronger we personalize any particular experience, feeling experience, thought and or feeling experience, the greater the intensity there is in the movement to personalize, simultaneously the farther we push everyone else away. And so you have to see that the habit of personalization creates this wall. It creates an ego boundary, and that's what the problem with it is. It's quite, for someone who wants to evolve beyond ego, this separation creating, boundary making habit is really the fundamental obstacle to personal liberation. So the simple point I'm making here is that the habit, the mental habit of personalization is what the ego is. So from the perspective of the fourth tenet, the law of impersonality, the habit of personalizing is what creates the ego. When to do the degree to which you, as the evolving self, cease to compulsively personalize your own experience, will be the degree to which your ego diminishes. But it really helps when you begin to, once again, this is the fourth tenet, and when you begin to see more and more all this in sense of process. The reason why it's important is because process with a capital P transcends 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 plus years of a human life. That's why you want to start thinking about the word process. Because when you really get it into your system, it forces you to think through this very narrow, orientation we have of thinking about time, right? Time in relationship to self. So evolutionary philosophy, evolutionary cosmology, evolutionary spirituality, starts to get you to think about deep time, which is the big shift. And when you start to when you get this notion of deep time begins to transcend just merely an intellectual grasp, but you kind of really get it at a deeper level. You start to see your own relationship to life, your own choices, your relationship to your mind and emotions, even your relationship to your body, but your relationship to life and to the process and to development, transcending this particular life, including it, of course, it absolutely includes it, directly and specifically, of course, but the way you think about life and the way you think about being engaged in life is not just about this life. That's the big difference, you see. You begin to think about, you're part of a process that has existed and been developing for billions of years. So that's an inherent part of your consciousness. You're part of this process, and therefore your relationship to this process is bigger than just this one life. That's another way that your attention begins to expand. You see, just beyond this egoic consciousness. Your egoic consciousness means that it's an egoic perspective. It's a small perspective. It's a personal perspective. It's a limited perspective. It's not cosmic, and there's no deep time perspective in it at all. That's the problem with it. This is very important. And it's a very big part of evolutionary spirituality, evolutionary philosophy, and evolutionary spirituality, and evolutionary enlightenment, is the whole notion of deep time, which is a really big thing when you get it. And it's a new kind of orientation for human beings. Deep time means you suddenly begins to dawn on you is process. But it's not process in some kind of flat, mechanical, just materialistic sense of just flat process. It's alive, and it's you. The process is you. So what's so important about it is that your sense of self, right? You begin to see your sense of self as part of this, almost infinite stream of development. That's what's so important about process.